Okay, if everybody's happy, we'll make a start unless I hear from anybody else.
I'll just get the confirmation that we're okay. We're live now. So if you'd like to begin, Councillor.
We are live. Thanks very much for that. Yeah. Okay. Welcome to all members and officers to tonight's meeting, and of course members of the public that are watching. Before I hand over the chair for the coming year, I'd like to say the most pleasing part of the last year on the South London Waste Partnership has been our continued progress in increasing recycling rates and obviously reducing the amount that we're putting to landfill. I think it's really important in doing our bit for the planet, and I see that as a big success of the last year. The highlight for me though was the work John Haynes did around communication work and the videos on the journey from recycling from people's doorsteps to the actual product that it becomes. I think it was very important that all the councils showed that video and that we really embraced that and got the message across that recycling does make a big difference. And I was also really pleased about how the South London Waste Partnership embraced the opportunity to get the public involved at our meetings and made sure that we allowed their opinions to be heard. And I really hope that that is something that will continue. So long may that continue. And I know tonight we've got some members of the public that will be asking some questions. Having said that, my biggest frustration though this year has been Viridor's reluctance to engage with our meetings process and their failure to keep up to date with the emissions data that we requested and asked them to put online. I know they only failed on 2 or 3 occasions, but I found that quite frustrating in that we emphasised right at the beginning when the incinerator started that we wanted all emissions to be out there and open in public and put timelessly online when they had that information. So that was one frustration. And again, another frustration, I feel it's taken way too long, in my opinion, for the fire service and Viridor to get the reports together and their conclusions together regarding the fire that happened at the incinerator site. So that is a frustration, but I do hope that now that Viridor has been sold on to another company who are taking over, sold on the 8th of July to a company called Kohlberg, Kravis and Robertson Co, KKR, that we can foster a more open relationship and transparent relationship with KKK. So I would particularly like to see our officers working with them to say, look, you know, any opportunities you want to take to come and address the South London Waste Partnership meeting, you know, I think it's good for your accountability as a company, and it's good for us to be able to hear members of the public's concerns or even ideas, but also how things are working in terms of incineration and the energy from recovery plant. So I hope that's something officers can try and foster again with the new management at KKR. But in general, as I said, I was very pleased this year with our efforts around recycling and landfill, which I think is really, really crucial in terms of our contribution to the planet. And indeed, I was asked to go over and speak to a similar authority over at East London about the successes we'd had in our partnership and the successes we'd had in our boroughs. And that was really interesting that they felt that the way we did things was very interesting and something that they were looking to take up, particularly campaigns around recycling. So the first item on the agenda is the appointment of chair and vice chair for 2020-21, and this year's chair will come from Kingston Council. So I would like to nominate Councillor Gander for chair. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to second that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. So Councillor Gander is now voting in as chair, so I'll hand over to Councillor Gander now.
Thank you very much, Councillor Collins, and thank you for your term of office, as it were, and all the work that you put in as chair. I'm looking forward to being chair this year as Kingston's representative. Could I now have nominations for Vice Chair from Sutton Council?
I would like to nominate Councillor Alaban for chair, please, for vice chair rather.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Yeah, I'd like to second Councillor Aberlin as well.
Thank you. Councillor Aberlin is voted chair. Okay.
Right.
Sorry, I heard something. Could we all mute when we're not speaking? Thank you. Good evening and welcome to this virtual South London Waste Partnership Committee, and welcome to all those members of the public watching on the Council's YouTube channel. It's the first one that we've had virtually, so please bear with us if we have any technical problems, but I don't anticipate that we will. If I could say that, can we have all our mobile phones, for those in the room, in the virtual room, can we have all our mobile phones either switched off or on silent mode, so that they don't ping when you're speaking during the meeting? That would be great. And if you could keep yourselves on mute, it helps with feedback. The meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's YouTube channel. A copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. Members and officers are reminded to keep their microphones on mute, as I said, unless they're called to speak. Members can indicate that they wish to speak using the meeting chat function. Now, please do not use the chat function to ask questions directly of officers or councillors, because they'll not be answered. Everything should come via the chair, please. The elected councillors who are present remotely in all our different locations this evening are members of this committee and will decide what action this committee takes on the issues it considers. We also have a number of officers present whose cameras are generally switched off, and they're here to advise the committee on the issues before it, and if they make contributions they will switch on their cameras. I'd now just like to, because I think the YouTube channel only shows the people that are speaking rather than the grid view that I've managed to get on my screen, I'd like members of the committee to just say good evening when I call them, if that would be okay. So I've got members of the committee. The first name on my list is Councillor Tim Cobbett from Kingston. You'd just like to say hello?
Thanks, Councillor Gander. Yes, I'm here. Good evening, everyone.
Right. Councillor Collins, you've already heard from, but let's see you again.
Hi, everybody. I'm here.
From Croydon. Councillor King, Stuart King.
Good evening, everybody. Stuart from Croydon.
Thank you, Stuart. Councillor Allison, Mark Allison.
Yeah, hello, Mark from Merton.
Hello. I've got Councillor Stephen Alambritis.
Councillor Alambritis sends his apologies.
Okay. Right. And Councillor Aberlin.
Good evening, I'm here.
Hello, and welcome to the deputy for this year. Do we have any other members that I've missed? Henry, if you've been keeping check on the list, have I missed a member? Anybody else wish to declare that they're here?
I think that's it, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And we have officers. I will just introduce you by name, and we will be hearing from you later. We have Andrea Keys, Interim Strategic Partnership Manager, South London Waste Partnership. John Haynes, Communications Advisor. Michael Mackey, Head of Finance, Operations and Resident Support, Shared Finance Services for Sutton and Kingston. And there are various other officers who are also present who may be called upon to advise if necessary. And we have also support from IT personnel in the background, which we hope we won't need. Okay, moving on to public participation. These are unusual times, as we know. There was a registration scheme for members of the public who wish to submit a question to the committee on an agenda item. Members of the public needed to have submitted a question by 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 22nd of July. The Democratic Services Officer will read out their question at the appropriate time, and a response will be provided by an officer. 2 councillors who are not members of this committee have requested to speak and ask questions on item 9. I have permitted both requests. Councillor Matty will be joining the meeting, although I understand that Councillor Sumner will not now be able to join the meeting. And so Councillor Matty will join when item 9 is introduced by the relevant officer. He will have up to 5 minutes to provide any introductory statement and ask his question to the committee. We will also be answering Councillor Sumner's question, so that will be read out. They will both be allowed a follow-up question, although Councillor Sumner won't be able to take advantage of that, after which the council will be asked to effectively leave the meeting and follow the rest of the proceedings on the YouTube stream. That's the basic protocol that we chose. I'd just like to point out that we are streaming and that we would like all contributions to be positive and relevant, and that we keep to matters that address the remit of this committee, and not to talk about officers or anything that's not relevant to this committee. The Democratic Services Officer will be in contact. We'll let the councillor, the one councillor that we have, know when it's time for him to join the meeting. And I think we're okay with that. As I say, we will read out Councillor Sumner's question on her behalf. Officers in attendance this evening are present to give an overview of reports and advice during the meeting. And as I said, the cameras and microphones will be off until it's their turn to inform the committee. Our Democratic Services Officer, Henry Yellop, I'd just like to ask you, Henry, do we have any apologies for absence or any substitutes?
Yes, we have Councillor Andrew from Sutton Council and Councillor Alan Brutus from Merton, both send their apologies, and there are no substitute members tonight. I can confirm that we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so moving on to the agenda, after all the preamble. We're now turning to the minutes of the previous meeting in Appendix 1. Are members happy to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of February 2020, which was the last time we met in person? Can you indicate using the chat function or speak now if you are not happy to approve the minutes? And I'll just pause for a second while we find the chat function. Found it myself. I can't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to take that as everybody agreeing the minutes. Pausing for another second or two. And so I will assume that the minutes are approved, and I'll sign them at a later date. Now turning to declarations of interest, members are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests and any other non-pecuniary interests, i.e. personal interests, relevant to items on the agenda. Do members have any declaration of interest? Could you again indicate using the chat function? And if you have, I will call you to speak. Just pausing for this important item. And I have nothing, and Henry will be double checking for me, our Democratic Services Officer. We don't have anybody disclosing any interests. Moving swiftly on, we're now turning to the agenda reports. And the first one is at item 6. It's phase A and B contract management report in appendix 2. This is an update on phase A and phase B contracts procured and managed by SLWP. And it's about the performance data between the 1st of April 2019 and the 31st of March 2020. And I'm going to turn to Andrea Keys to present this report.
Thank you, Chair.
Andrea.
Yep, so this is the contract management report for the period 1st of April 2019 to the 31st of March, excuse me, 2020. The report provides a performance summary for the following contracts. You have contract 1, which is waste receipt and transfer services. Contract 2 is our HRC services, and contract 3, which includes green and food waste composting services. And finally, it also includes the phase B residual waste treatment contract. The waste and contract 1, the waste transfer and haulage contract, is referenced in 1.7 of the report. This is operated by Viridor Waste Management Limited.
Sorry, just to interrupt, Councillor Allison has dropped out of the meeting, so we may have to just pause, and I'll try and get into contact with him. Oh, no, he's joined back again. I'll just wait until you... Councillor Allison, are you there?
Okay. Welcome back, Councillor Allison. Andrea, would you like to continue?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the contract 1, the waste transfer and haulage, was 1.7 of the report, and there are no issues to report with the delivery of service under this contract. Section 2 of the report summarises the performance at our HRC sites, which are managed by Violia. 2.3 of the report provides a summary of our response to COVID-19 and notes that following government guidance on the 24th of March, the partner boroughs, together with all other London boroughs, made the decision to close the HRCs to public access on the basis that travel to the HRCs did not fit with the essential travel only and the reasonable excuse restrictions set out in government guidance and subsequent health protection regulations. During the closure period, SLWP worked collaboratively with boroughs to create a booking system for the sites located in Kingston, Merton and Sutton, and we supported Croydon in an enhanced traffic management scheme at the 3 Croydon sites. All 6 sites reopened again on the 13th of May. Returning to the contract performance, if you go to 2.5 of the report, we've highlighted the customer satisfaction surveys, which are undertaken in person at each of the sites on a rolling rota. The combined survey results continue to show that satisfaction levels are above 80%, suggesting that our residents are generally happy with the service. From 2.8 to 2.14 in the report, we detail the recycling performance at the 6 sites, and we offer some high-level analysis of the performance. Recycling markets do continue to be challenging. However, we are pleased to report there has been a marginal improvement on the recycling performance at the sites combined compared to the same period last year. We continue to work with Violia on a number of improvement measures. I've updated this committee on those before, and the trials are aimed at finding new ways to increase recycling. These improvement measures are summarised in 2.16 of the report. And finally, on the HRC site performance, it's also useful to note that the sites have seen a 5% drop in residual waste, reducing the disposal and associated haulage costs with this service by just over £90,000 when compared to the previous financial year. And in addition, the reduction in rubble tonnes has saved boroughs a further £40,000. So moving on to section 3 of the report, contract 3 is our green food waste composting contract, and a summary of the tonnes are found in the appendix. In section 4 of the report, which is page 22, the report covers our 2012 residual waste treatment contract with Viridor South London. During the reporting period, boroughs delivered just over 202,000 tonnes of residual waste. This equates to roughly a 3% reduction in our residual waste tonnes when you compare these to the previous year. And this gives boroughs a combined financial saving of just under £600,000. A key performance target within the residual waste treatment contract is a requirement to divert waste from landfill. For the reporting period, the target diversion rate was 91.34%, and Viridor exceeded that by diverting 95% of our waste from landfill. And section 4.4 of the report, you've got a summary of the full year of ERF emissions for the reporting period. Section 4.5 of the report covers carbon monoxide, and it's highlighted that during the period April 2019 to March 2020, there were 19 exceedances of the 30-minute average for carbon monoxide. In each circumstance, the level of carbon monoxide increased above the permitted level temporarily before quickly, usually within a matter of seconds, returning to permitted operating conditions. Section 4.7 of the report summarises the permit variation to CO emissions monitoring, where the monitoring period for CO was increased from every 30 minutes to every 10 minutes. This brings the Beddington ERF in line with industry standard. Finally, at point 5, the recommendation is that members note the content of the report, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Now, what I've decided to do is to take questions from members of the public or councillors at the top of each item. Henry, can you confirm if we got a question from a member of the public or a councillor for this agenda item?
Yes, we received one question, well, a set of questions from Councillor Tim Foster from the Beddington North Ward in Sutton, who unfortunately couldn't attend tonight's meeting. So I'll read the statement out. There's 3 questions. I think it's more convenient for Andrea to answer after all 3 questions have been asked. Okay, so speaking on behalf of Councillor Tim Foster now. At the Council's recent Strategy and Resources Committee, members were presented with the draft South London Waste Plan that was approved for consultation. In brackets, I voted against. My understanding is that this document is a cooperative effort by all 4 member boroughs of the SLWP, one assumes within the representation of your committee. I would appreciate answers from your group on the following questions. So question number 1, my ward of Beddington North is scheduled for more waste than the rest of the 4 boroughs put together. What action have the 4 boroughs taken to balance the carbon footprint of that volume within this small area? Question number 2, the licensed capacity for waste in Beddington North far exceeds that currently processed. For example, the 777 site is licensed for a greater tonnage than the Viridor site opposite. What actions are the SWP, and the administrations of the 4 boroughs doing to ensure that these licensed allowances are not exercised under planning law? And question number 3, a zero carbon target is espoused by members of the SLWP if the 4 boroughs manage to achieve 100% recycling. Contractual obligations and permissions to Viridor would mean the import of a balanced tonnage from outside the area of the SLWP. Why is there nothing in the South London Waste Plan to address this issue or to form collective strategies? For example, addressing retail packaging to move us towards the stated targets. I look forward to hearing the responses, and I'm quite happy to address your committee in person at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Henry, and we thank Councillor Foster for his questions. I'm going to hand over now to Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll answer those questions, 3 questions together. So the new South London Waste Plan is an important planning policy document that is being jointly developed by the borough's 4 planning authorities. Its key aim is to safeguard existing waste sites and set out development management policies to guide waste treatment in the future. It's important to note that the South London Waste Plan deals with all types of waste from all operators, not just local authority collected waste. The plan is written by the borough's planning authorities. The South London Waste Partnership boroughs are treated like any other stakeholder within the 4 boroughs by the planning policy officers. We are consultees, but no more than that. So the plan does not fall under the remit of this committee. The draft new South London Waste Plan was discussed in detail in Sutton Council's Strategy and Resources Committee on the 6th of July, when most of the issues raised by Councillor Foster were discussed. A recording of that meeting is available on the Sutton Council YouTube channel, and I would encourage any interested parties to view it there. I would like to clarify one point that Councillor Foster makes. Planning officers at the Sutton Strategy and Resources Committee did point out that whilst it's true Sutton takes more than its share of a large share of the household waste, it receives very little construction and demolition waste compared to some of the other SLWP boroughs. So it's important to take that into consideration. And finally, the draft South London Waste Plan is due to be published for consultation in the near future. And so I would encourage local stakeholders and residents to get involved in that consultation and express their views on this very important planning policy document. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Yes, so questions, that was a question about the South London Waste Plan, which, as Andrea says, we do not cover on this joint waste committee, but it's an important, it's something that we are part of. Was the reason for including members and public questions at the outset of an item is so that members on the committee can take into account anything that's said by those contributions. So if there's anything you want to pick up from there as well, you're at liberty to do so. But I now will turn to members of the committee. And I have in the chat indication that there are, so far, 2 members who'd like to speak. And the first one would be Councillor King. If you'd like to unmute.
Thank you, Chair. I've got two questions. The first relates to paragraph 2.4 and the different approaches that were employed to operate the HRRCs during the COVID lockdown. So we had one approach, which was the sort of booking system, and then there was one that my host home borough operated, which is the enhanced traffic management scheme. I just wondered if Andrea could say a little bit about what the impact of those two approaches were in terms of the amount of recycling and materials that could be brought to the stations. And then at what point in the sort of reporting cycle she would expect the actual sort of tonnage and figures to be presented. So that was my first part. And then if I could raise the second one, this relates to paragraph 4.7. In which it says that the Environment Agency made a variation to the permit for the Beddington ERF in January of this year. And whilst it sets out reasons, I was just interested in why, in the specifics around the timing, and whether that might be linked to what is referenced in section 4.5, where it says during the period between April 2019 and March 2020, there had been 19 exceedances. And I just wondered whether they're linked, or if Andrea could explain another reason why, specifically in January 2020, that change to the permit arrangements was made. Those are my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor King. Andrea, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so in response to your first question, the different approach, so specifically in relation to the materials, what did the outcome of those different approaches produce? Well, the approach to the booking system, it was designed to control the numbers. Obviously, during the site closure, we assumed that there would be a build-up of demand for the HRRC site. So it was a risk that we identified before we reopen. There's going to be this pent-up demand. There's going to be a spike in demand for the use of the HRRC sites. So we wanted to consider, how do we manage that increased demand whilst also managing social distance and keeping everyone safe? So we thought it was important to look at the sites on an individual basis. So there are 2 sites that are co-located with collection depots, and we were very keen to manage the traffic flow at those because we wanted to protect the collection services. Any further delay to collection services would have had a detrimental impact on our waste management. So that was the key, and that was the reason we introduced the booking system. So it was all about managing the traffic flow and protecting the collections. At the Croydon site, your sites are really very popular. I mean, you can process up to 1,500 people in a day in your 3 sites. So the driver for the Croydon sites was to process that backlog as quickly as we possibly could. So it was about getting as many people through as we possibly could in a shorter time as possible to get rid of that backlog of waste, to get rid of, to kind of get back up to speed with demand. The second part of your question was around the materials that we collected. And in the end, although we took these two very different approaches, in the end, your percentages, the first look at your percentages for that Q1 show that, well, there was a 75% reduction on average in the total tons brought through the site. I mean, that's significant in itself to begin with. But we took a gradual approach to the range of materials that could be taken. So when we first opened, as I say, the key was to get people in and processed out as quickly as possible. So we limited the range of recyclers. So we take about 28 different types of materials at the HRCs. And during that initial period when there were still social distancing measures in place, we were really keen to make sure that actually we gave people as much space on site as possible. So we reduced the materials from 28 down just to those core four materials. So did it have an impact on your tonnages? Yes. There's like I say, it was about 75% on average across the 6 sites drop in tons managed at the site. Was there a marked difference between the booking system and the Croydon approach? At this stage, it's a little bit. It looks very close, to be honest. So I would suggest that there isn't a huge difference in the waste tons, in the total tons taken. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you, Andrea. That was my first question, so thank you.
Lovely. Okay, and then the second question, your question was in regard to the variation in the way the ERF measures the CO limits. So the change to the way that the carbon monoxide is measured wasn't a result of the 19 exceedances. So the changes were introduced following application to vary the permit to bring it in line with industry standard. So it's a UK industry standard of measuring the carbon monoxide over that 10-minute period, and it's a more frequent, it's 3 times more frequent monitoring than was in place before. So it's definitely an improvement. But no, it was as a result of an industry moving to an industry standard way of measuring the carbon monoxide.
And Andrea, am I right in thinking that the increasing frequency, well, first of all, gives us, we will be quicker to pick something up if there is an exceedance. Is that right? So is that why it's done?
It's well, it's an industry standard, and yes, it would pick up. It would pick up any variances in a quicker time, yes, because it looks at the average over 10 minutes rather than 30 minutes. So it's more sensitive in that respect when you reduce the average. So yes, that's right.
And the daily limits remain the same, don't they?
Daily limits remain the same. So there were no changes to the 50 milligrams per meter cube for the day.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Was that all, Councillor King?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have also Councillor Aberlan who wishes to ask a question. Councillor Aberlan, would you like to?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask a question as well on the HRC, and especially during the lockdown and since we reopened with different systems and so on. I got my anecdotal evidence from social media and emails and so on was that residents really the response was really positive, and especially customer satisfaction on site, the experience once they were in the at the recycling center. I wonder if I know you haven't done a survey, but I wonder if that's the impression that officers also got, and whether, I mean, this applies to Sutton, but whether customer satisfaction was good across the partnership. And I also wanted to ask whether there's officers are giving consideration potentially or exploring a permanent booking system, and whether that's a system that could work, or when, you know, over the weekends permanent, during the week not, over the weekend booking systems during the week, not a booking system, or just a permanent booking system. I think it'd be worth, whether we go for it or not, it's a different story, but I think it'd be worth exploring it. But I wonder if officers have some thoughts around that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Aberlin. Andrea.
Yeah, so we have seen a really positive response to the booking forms. We've had a lot of compliments about it. People do appreciate being able to arrive at the site, knowing they'll be able to access the site, knowing the queues will be short, and they'll get through and the site quickly and without issue. And I think particularly when we first opened, you know, when there were concerns around social distancing, that was the strongest feedback that we received, that people felt safe, they felt it was well controlled. And you know, and that was the aim. That's what we wanted to achieve. And yes, we are looking at obviously the system that we designed for that reopening was designed very, very quickly, and you know, officers worked really hard actually on getting it rolled out in a short time. But there are things that we'd like to do differently with the booking system. There's things that there's extra things that we would like to do with it. So yes, we are looking at alternative booking systems that are on the market. Obviously no decision's been made, but yeah, I think it's important, given the positive feedback, that actually it was designed to manage the COVID reopening, and actually it might be something that residents and customers like going forward. So yeah, definitely a project that we're working on.
That's good to hear, and certainly we had good feedback from those residents in Kingston who visited the TIP during that period. And I think, you know, whilst it's been a difficult time, there've been lots of advantages. You know, the quieter roads, etc., the cleaner air in general, and also the visit to the TIP has been a better experience as well. So I have also Councillor Tim Cobbett, who would like to ask a question. Over to you, Tim.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. It's really just to follow on from the discussion we've been having. Likewise, the feedback I've received, although we had a certain amount of frustration early on when people were working out how to book slots, and at the beginning weren't always able to get one until they gradually expanded in number. But actually since then, feedback's been pretty positive that people have been able to turn up. They're expected at a particular time. They're then not waiting in a long queue, and they get seen very quickly. I suppose the thing I'd want to encourage the team to think about on behalf of the partnership if we go forward is, if we are going to sort of carry on in similar vein, but potentially gradually increasing the number of slots, just to work very closely with the kind of customer services and IT teams in each of the councils, because it's really important that we have a smooth process, an easy to use booking system. And then we do also have the perennial issue of, yes, we have a primarily online population now and a primarily online system, but there will be people who cannot access booking online. And then it's just thinking about how we manage that, utilising kind of, you know, friends and family, you know, community settings and libraries, etc. Because probably in the case of, certainly in our council and in many councils, you wouldn't have the capacity to have a significant number of people sort of phoning up the council, or the council ending up having to sort of be a phone booking service for the facilities. So it would be about how we maximise the digital, and then how we support those who don't have access to digital if we do indeed go further down that route, which I wouldn't in principle be against. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim, for your comments. Yeah, I think it's worth us cautiously welcoming this opportunity with the booking service, whilst making sure it's accessible and equal for everyone. I would like to, Andrea, I don't necessarily need you to comment, that you're welcome to if you want to. I'd like to see us moving forward together with other parts of each of our councils to make sure that it's as inclusive as possible for as long as we do keep the booking system. So I'd just like that noted, really. And I'm going to, yes, Andrea's nodding, so I'm going to move on. I'm just happy to move on. So as far as I can see, and please unmute and let me know if I'm wrong, I have no further questions on this item indicated by the chat function. So I'm about to say, can we agree to note the contents of this report? Is everybody happy to do that? If you can indicate using the chat function if you're not. I've got a thumbs up there from Councillor Aberlin. But if there is anybody who is not happy to note the contents of the report and for us to move on, please indicate now in the chat. And again, that pause, which is very awkward for everybody. But just to make sure, in case everybody's all fingers and thumbs, no, we're okay. I think we're okay to move on, Henry. I will now move on to item 7. So item 7 is the SLWP budget outturn. We have this in Appendix 3, and it is, yes, item 7. And we've got the update from Michael Mackey, who is finance lead, who will present this report. You have 2 items, so it's just the first one for now, please, Michael. You could unmute and present the report.
Evening, Chair. This is a little bit later than usual, the outturn. It usually comes much earlier in the committee, but not in the committee, but in the year. Yes, this paper does provide the outturn position for the partnership's budget for the 2019-20 financial year. The final outturn position for the year was a £72,000 underspend, and the main variances are explained in paragraphs 2.3 to 2.5. But I'd just like to note that in paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4, it refers to forecasting an over or underspend. But for clarity, these are the outturn positions, not forecasts. And the recommendation is to note the content of the report. Any questions?
Michael. Can I just ask Henry if there were any questions submitted by members of the public for this agenda item?
No, there were none, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I will turn to the committee. I have one question myself. So since I don't have any councillors indicating a question, I will leap in there, which is that, Michael, on the face of it, this is a good budget report with an underspend, but I just wanted to ask about what impact there's been, if any, of the projects and contract management underspending by such an amount. Is this something that we've been able to absorb, or is there some catching up to do in some respects?
And the main underspend was in relation to a vacant post, but as you'll see in the next item, there is a review happening on the structure, the financing structure, sorry, the staffing structure, the resource structure. So that will be picked up, I think, within the. It wasn't sort of a planned underspend at the time. The post was originally going to be recruited to, but it wasn't, and it's obviously subject to the governance review and a review of. Is your question?
I for one lost you there for a few seconds. Sorry, could you just say the last sentence again, please?
Yeah, the main underspend was due to the vacant post, and because of the governance review and the review of the staffing resource, it wasn't sort of a planned underspend, but one that's been sort of forced upon by having the review of the staffing structure.
Okay, thank you. And as you say, we'll come on to that in the next item. So I still don't have any members indicating that they have any questions for Michael. Please indicate in the chat function if you do. I'll just pause for a second. And if I've missed anybody, could you please unmute and speak now? Okay, it looks like we can agree to note the contents of this report. If you have any objections, please indicate using the chat function or speak now. And we're happy to move on. So Henry, if you could note that. Okay, and now we're going back to Michael Mackey for his second update, the budget update at month 3. Michael, if you would present the report, please.
Yes, I will. This paper provides an update on the partnership's budget position for its strategic management activities at month 3 of the financial year and the projected outturn for 2021 financial year. The projected outturn position for the year at month 3 is £112,000 underspend, and the major variances are explained in paragraphs 2.3 and 2.4. However, I'll draw your attention in particular to paragraph 2.3 and the position that a review of the SLWP staff resource is currently being carried out, and the forecast has been based on all 3 posts that are currently vacant, remaining vacant for the rest of the financial year, pending the completion of the review. The review is due to conclude in September, and the forecast will be updated following the completion of this review, when there will be a clearer position on the staffing requirement. And again, the recommendation is to note the content of the report.
Thank you, Michael. I'll ask Henry, were there any questions submitted by members of the public on this agenda item?
No, there were none, Chair.
Thank you. So I'm turning to the committee in the room, in the virtual room. Do you have any questions for Michael? Please use the chat function if you do. It looks as though you're having a quiet night, Michael.
I'd like to hear that. Thank you.
No, I see no questions. Can we agree to note the contents of the report? If there are any objections, can you put it in the chat function, please? And that would be unlikely. So I think we can move on. So we agree to note the contents of the report. Thank you, Henry. Right, so we now move on to the next item, which is at Appendix 5, item 9 in the report. It is the Viridor fire report. We've waited a while for this, and I welcome that this report is coming. I know there's a lot of interest in it, so we may well spend some time on this rather than the previous items, which have gone very swiftly. Andrea, will you please present the report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the fire report. This is a report into the fire at the waste transfer station on Beddington Lane. The covering report we've provided contains an overview of the incident and a summary of the key findings made by the fire service, the Environment Agency and Viridor's own fire investigation. Attached to this report, there are 2 Environment Agency reports referencing the fire, the London Fire Service confirmation of attendance and Viridor's fire investigation report in full. And on Monday of this week, we also received permission to include 2 further reports from the London Fire Service. So this was circulated as a late item and can be read as a further appendix to this report. So I wanted to run through some of the detail in the report, and then I believe we'll take some more questions on this one. So as to the background, and to summarise the timetable of events, on the 11th of July, a fire occurred at the Viridor Waste Transfer Station on Beddington Lane, and Viridor have classified the fire as a significant event. Viridor completed their internal investigation report in December, and on the 28th of January this year, Viridor met with SLWP officers to discuss that draft report. Then, as you can see detailed in 1.3 of the report, the strategic manager provided a verbal update to this committee on the 4th of February. At the time of that February committee, both the London Fire Service and the Environment Agency had confirmed to Viridor that further submissions were to be made, and so Viridor wished to wait until they had received these 2 reports before they concluded their own investigations. In March 2020, the London Fire Brigade provided Viridor with a fire investigation report, and the EA provided a further compliance assessment report. Both agencies confirmed that the provision of these reports represented the conclusion of their investigation. So that's a summary of the timetable, and I just wanted to run through the fire reports as well, as they were late items. So in terms of the additional fire service reports, the report of attendance states that there was an estimated time of 5 to 13 minutes between ignition and discovery. The The fire service were called immediately. There was no fire alarm system in the vicinity of the fire, but there was no rapid fire growth. The London Fire Brigade investigation report states that the site appeared to be well maintained, no injuries were reported, and that the fire originated from the pile of waste being moved by the front loader. The report concludes that a full examination of the waste was not possible. No samples were taken, and the cause of the fire has been recorded as unknown, which, as I understand it, and the covering letter from the fire service said, is not uncommon. The EA reports highlight that the waste transfer station was being used for the receipt, inspection and storage of residual bulky waste from the SLWP, and whilst the waste is permitted on site, Viridor were not authorised to use this area of the site for the inspection and storage of residual waste, and so this was in breach of the permit. The EA used a compliance classification scheme, the CCS, in order to calculate the non-compliance score, and in this instance, the EA categorised it as a CCS3, a non-compliance which would have had a minor environmental impact. The final appendix attached to this report, which is page 22, is the Viridor fire report. Viridor's report acknowledges that there was a higher than normal volume of residual waste in the transfer station at the time of the fire, and that the waste was being stored for longer periods than usual. There are assumptions made as to the possible source of the fire, and a further summary of events are made by Viridor. The Viridor report proposes changes that will be made in order to reduce the impact of a further fire, and these include the occupation of the entire ERF pre-treatment facility for the receipt and inspection of bulky waste, a reduction in waste tonnes handled in the waste transfer station at any one time, and also an increase in the frequency of the thermal checking systems. Since drafting this report, Viridor has confirmed that the area affected by the fire is no longer being used to receive waste, and there are currently no plans to use this area of the site for the receipt of residual waste going forward. So all bulky waste is now being taken to the ERF pre-treatment building, which is fitted with a sprinkler system and a fire detection system. As a contingency measure, Viridor are considering the use of an alternative, adjacent and suitably permitted waste transfer station, which was modified in December 2019, and now includes a fire detection system and call points. So those were the sections of the report that I wanted to highlight. Obviously, the recommendation is to note the contents of the report. So if there are some questions, so happy to receive those, Chair.
Thank you, Andrea. I just wanted to check that all members have seen the late material that was published on Tuesday this week. Can I make sure that everybody's seen this? If you haven't, can you let me know in the usual fashion? Yeah. Okay. So I have nothing in the chat. As previously stated, Councillor Matty has requested he speak to the committee regarding this item. I welcome the councillor to this meeting. Councillor Matty, please can you now address the committee with your comments and your questions? We have received a copy, thank you. You're reminded that you have 5 minutes to speak. We'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time is up, and you then have an opportunity to ask a follow-up question. So, Councillor,
yeah, can speak now?
Great. Would you like to put on your camera? Would that be okay?
Okay, certainly. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I could speak now. First of all, I'd just like to talk briefly about the draft South London Waste Plan. I disagree about the fact that inert waste is distributed over other boroughs, which sort of compensates for Beddington being the centre of all the waste, but basically ends up in Beddington. In fact, the Environment Agency has issued permits for 2.4 million tonnes of waste in the Beddington cluster. And I noticed in the draft South London Waste Plan it's talked about 600,000 tonnes. So somehow 75% of the waste is missing. I'm very concerned that we now have got a Liberal Democratic chair and a Liberal Democratic vice chair. And obviously, as far as the incinerator goes, it's a political sort of nightmare as two boroughs that are trying to go carbon neutral, the incinerator. And I feel that the South London Waste Partnership is basically it's one of its functions is to try and cover the councils from appearing to be environmentally unsound. I think what we need to establish as well is that we talk about the fire being in the waste transfer station. The fire itself took place in buildings that where Viridor had installed a machine specifically to break up mattresses. Now, the narrative from Viridor is that there were 100 tons of mattresses, and these all appear to have come from the South London Waste Partnership. But we know that Viridor are licensed to incinerate 100,000 tons of trade waste. Now, we cannot assume that all these mattresses came from the South London Waste Partnership, because that's a large figure. So that needs to be clarified, because obviously all mattresses are treated with chemicals which, when they do catch light, are highly toxic, and there are special guidelines. And one of the things that we need to understand is that the temperature that they try and maintain in the incinerator is about 850 degrees. And is this high enough, this temperature, to kill off the furans if Viridor are in the business of burning mattresses in very large quantities? And also the reason why there weren't any samples taken to discover the fire, so we had to fall back on the standard Viridor response that it was either lithium batteries or people having a barbecue with broke holes, is because they went to great pains to completely wash down the site and get everything off the site when the fire, immediately after the fire. And they made a trade reporter and photographer. They got him to leave the site. Now, on my basics, I mean, I'm building up the case why the whole relationship between the South London Waste Partnership and Viridor needs to be investigated. I mean, what we've got to come to terms with is that if these four boroughs are, as they say, wanting to go carbon neutral, we've got to come to terms with the fact that the Viridor incinerator,
1 minute left.
Sorry, is the largest single source of airborne polluters and greenhouse gases in the London Borough of Sutton. It emits something of the order of about 300,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide per year. And what there at the moment is that there's no means of measuring how much carbon dioxide is. It's a big secret, and we need to find with this. And also we need to get figures from Viridor on how much material that they are burning, which it should be recyclable. I mean, most industry estimates is that a typical incinerator will burn around 50% of what it burns is actually plastic. And this, in fact, should not be incinerated. It should be landfilled. And we need to get these figures. I mean, the reporting from Viridor is appalling. When I look at reports coming from German incinerator companies.
5 minutes.
Pardon, sorry? Okay, I'll just conclude then. And I will just pose my question. I think I've tried to establish in my preamble, which I hope you've got a copy, you'll be able to read what the other 15 points that I made. But my question is, when can an independent investigation begin into the 16 points that I've raised? Who can frame the scope of the investigation? And who can, we need a full investigation into what actually goes on at the incinerator and what is the environmental impact of it, and not we do not want just the efforts of PR people. And I'd like to, my question is, when can this take place? That's my question.
Thank you, Councillor Matty. I was trying to follow your questions from what you submitted, and it may well be that when we come to the answers, we won't be able to give all of them, since it wasn't quite what I had in front of me. So
I think Councillor Matty's just accidentally left the meeting.
Oh dear.
Yeah. If we just pause for a second.
Yes.
Yes, now he's back now, sorry.
I decided to switch myself off rather than my microphone. Okay.
We've all done that. Okay.
So
Well, welcome back. I was just saying that obviously what you submitted before we had a chance to look at, and the officer had a chance to get some answers. I'm not sure. I was trying to follow it, so it may well be that some of the questions, some of the things you posed were slightly different. So we may have to get back to you on some of the points that you raised. Andrea, do you have, are you good to go?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah. Firstly, thank you thank you for your comments and your observations. You have, as you say, you've raised quite a number of points. So what I'll do is I'll try and focus my answer to your last question, and then perhaps if you did want more information, I can follow up with a detailed response. So your question is in regard to the investigation. So I think the fire has been independently investigated by both the London Fire Service and the Environment Agency. Viridor have also produced their own incident report. All of these documents have been presented to this Joint Waste Committee tonight. And having considered those reports, we're satisfied that the investigation is complete. And no further issues are highlighted, and therefore a further investigation isn't warranted. What we will do is, of course, we will continue to manage the service through the the usual contract management mechanisms, and I'll carry on with the site visits, contract meetings, the health and safety user groups, regular reporting. I'll continue to discuss the fire prevention plan with Viridor and do my site walkovers, and if required, SLWP, we have got the option to apply what we call the performance management framework mechanism under the contract. So if there is a contractual cause to do this, we will use that. So I think that hopefully answers your key question at the end of your statement, and as I say, I'm happy to more than happy to follow it up with a written response to your other 16 points as well. Thank you.
Can I just come back? There's a couple of things that I'd like to pick up from what Councillor Matty was talking about, because I would wholeheartedly agree with plastic should not be put into the should not be inside the energy recovery facility, should not be processed. We want to get plastic recycled as far as possible, so we're not because it is toxic, it is burned. So I would wholeheartedly agree with you there, and it's part of the job of this committee to make sure that we get those messages out to people that it's really important that they recycle their plastics. So that's something that I would hope we will be pushing this year as one of our messages that we get out to our residents. I wanted to pick up on the actions that were taken because when the fire had happened, because I do know, I've read myself that there were, obviously I wasn't there, but I read in the reports like everyone else that there was movement of the waste, and as I understood it, that was in order to help tackle the fire. That's what the London, I think it was the London Fire Brigade said why that was done. I think there was an implication. I don't know whether it was deliberate, Councillor Matty, that this was they would wash down the Viridor wash down the site, but I can see no indication from any of the independent reports that was the case. I'm diving into realms that perhaps better from an officer. Could you comment on that, please, Andrea?
Yes, absolutely. As you say, in the London Fire Service report, it describes the actions that took place. Obviously, the fire started as the front loader was pushing up the waste, and in order to effectively then put out the waste, you need to spread it out, and then obviously the whole load was then extinguished. So I think it's quite clear in the London Fire Service investigation and their initial report that the reason for there being a lack of a sample is because of the method used to fight the fire. And it was not a Viridor decision.
Can I
Yes,
I just come in there?
I was just going to come back to you, Councillor Matty. Right. I was just going to mention, as Andrea did, that I think the questions that you posed, that you sent to us, we're happy to send you a response to those. And of course, there's not just the committee that gives you an opportunity to deal with the Joint Waste Committee. You can correspond with us, of course, at any time. So we can send you that response and we can have a dialogue there. I was also going to, of course, offer you the opportunity to come back and ask a follow-up question.
Thank you very much. What I was talking about was after the fire had been extinguished, there was a big clean-up operation and the public relations exercise kicked in, where the fire was described as a minor fire. A public relations expert from the South London Waste Partnership came over to address local residents, and Sutton Council put out, basically reiterated what Viridor had said. And as I said, I'm not prepared to accept that 100 tons of mattresses all came from the South London Waste Partnership. My view is if Viridor got specific equipment to break up these mattresses to separate the metal parts before they go into the incinerator, is that it's nothing to do with a waste transfer station. Mattresses are probably part of a commercial contract, which is probably extremely lucrative to dispose of mattresses, and we need to do this. And also the whole reason behind incinerators is because the recycling councils find it more lucrative not to recycle properly, and that's why so much plastic finds its way. Plastic is basically derived from fossil fuels, and the idea is that burning plastic is somehow environmentally friendly is completely wrong. I mean, the government's chief scientific advisor said that if you've got the option with plastic and you cannot recycle it currently, you should landfill it, because if you landfill it, it will not release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. If you take an incinerator that's burning 300,000 tons of material a year, and 150,000 tons of that is plastic, you can see that the potential amount of carbon dioxide is probably approaching 175,000 tons of carbon dioxide. I mean, municipal solid waste, when it's burned, produces at the lower limit about 0.7 tons of carbon dioxide, and at the upper limit about 1.2, 1.3. When you burn plastic, it's right up the upper limit. And this is, if all these boroughs, if 4 boroughs really care about global warming, they do need to get figures from Viridor, how much in their estimation of the stuff that they're burning is plastic. I mean, this is happening all across Europe. All the incineration taxes are being put in, so it's going to happen sooner or later in this country, and we need to try and get an idea on how much we are. on my calculations alone, if I'll just conclude with this very, very quickly. On my calculations alone, if we look at the amount of electricity that's being generated from the 23 megawatt generators, there is approximately at the moment 1.5 kilograms of carbon dioxide for every kilowatt hour of electricity generated. That is 10 times more than the carbon dioxide produced on my electricity bill, and I don't even pay. I don't get it from exclusively from renewable sources. So this is a problem that we've got, and this is why the South London Waste Partnership needs to answer these questions. And the thing is, it's got to be much more arm's length from Viridor or their new owners, KKR, and because they deserve that. Residents deserve this. You cannot get residents councils cannot tell residents to become more environmentally aware, to have a low carbon lifestyle when they're paying council tax, so that the 4 councils can send all their waste, a large percentage of which would be off to be incinerated. And this is the ludicrous. This is the ludicrous. We should not be burning plastic. And
no,
okay. All right. Anyway, look, I really appreciate you taking my questions, and I thank you very much that you've given me so much time. Thank you.
And we, as a committee, we really appreciate your interest. We also don't want to, as I said, we do not want to be burning plastics, and we're going to be making every effort not to. And I would like to come to Andrea to just talk about a couple of things there, and we may have to go back to you on a couple of the things that you raised just then. But the fact that you said it was lucrative not to recycle properly, that's not my impression. My impression is that where we come to our best savings for outlay is where we're recycling properly. So I don't know whether you have a comment on that. There's a question that I've picked up about the number of mattresses, and I'd like us to look into that. I suspect you don't have the answer to that right now about was there a huge number of mattresses for some reason. You may have an answer there, but if not, we can have a look at that. And is there anything else that you've picked up that you'd like to comment on, Andrea?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So in terms of there being 100 tons of mattresses, I think that the photos, I've just had a quick look at the report, that I think there weren't, the whole waste pile wasn't 100% mattresses. There were mattresses in the waste pile, but I don't believe it was 100%, 100 tons of mattresses. It was 50 to 100 tons of waste, but there were mattresses in there. And I suppose I just wanted to highlight that, we're working really hard to improve our recycling and to get as much recycling out of the residual waste. And actually, we've got one of the highest recycling rates in London. Partnership boroughs, we've really improved on our recycling performance. So I think it's really worth highlighting that, and we are working really hard with our residents, with our communication, with our collections contractor, to keep going and to keep improving on our recycling. It is important, it's important to all of the boroughs. The boroughs have really strong ambitions to reduce the carbon and to get to net zero, and we play a part in that, of supporting that, and the ERF plays a key role in that, and Viridor do recognise that, and that reducing the carbon is a contractual requirement for Viridor, and we do meet, and we are developing a carbon management plan as part of a carbon working group with the contractor. So these are things that we are looking at, and there's a lot of work that's being done, and a lot of improvements already been made as well.
Will I just finally just make one very small point?
I would prefer if you wouldn't, Councillor.
It's so brief. It's so brief. If you give someone a 25-year contract and they sell the electricity, and electricity is derived from setting light to things producing steam, then you cannot reduce the amount of carbon or plastic burn, because if you do, then Viridor do not have their business doesn't work. It only works because you have to set light to things to make it, and that's the point.
Matty, this item, I did mention earlier that if it's not relevant, it's actually relevant, obviously, to the committee, but it's not relevant to this item. I know that we have answered this question on previous occasions. There is not an intention to burn more waste than we need to. And I'd like to leave it at that. Thank you. And thank you for your contribution. And you're effectively leaving the meeting now. Thanks. I will now give the opportunity, the floor, if you like, to members of the committee. And I think the first person on the list is Councillor Collins. Just a second. Henry, do I have another question on this?
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. So we received a question from a councillor from Kingston, from Alexandra Ward, Councillor Sharon Sumner, and unfortunately she's unable to attend tonight. But her question I'm reading on her behalf. So, on how many occasions in the past 2 years has the fire service attended the Beddington incinerator plant? I understand that one fire last year took over 24 hours to extinguish. What is the financial cost to Kingston residents of this poor safety record, and what is being done to improve fire safety at the plant?
Thank you, Henry. Andrea?
Thank you, Chair. Aside from the July 2019 incident, over the last 2 years, the Fire Brigade have not had to attend the Beddington site, the waste transfer station, landfill, or the ERF on a single occasion, apart from planned regular visits. So, there's no cost to Kingston residents in that respect. Okay.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Thank you very much. And yes, so now we have actually questions submitted by members of the public, and I believe there are a couple of those as well. Henry, could you let us know?
Yes, there are 3 more questions previously submitted by members of the public. So I'll go through the first one now, from Jim Duffy. This was a sort of combination of, this is a report, it's comprised of various statements that I think it would be more convenient to answer in each turn and break it down that way, rather than give the whole report and then answer all the questions at the end. I think it's just more convenient to answer them one by one. So on behalf of Jim Duffy, I'll read out his report now. A fire composed of 50 to 100 tons of commercial waste, including mattresses, occurred on July 11th, 2019. 4 fire engines and 20 firefighters were needed, with firefighters in place for 9 hours. A dark plume, several hundred feet high, was reported in the news media from mid-morning onwards. Our group wrote to the Environment Agency, London Fire Brigade and London Assembly over the pollution risk. We consider this report to be unacceptable for the following reasons. So reason number 1, this was a foreseeable and preventable incident. Viridor had fires at 14 of its sites in the previous 5 years. The report talks about lessons learnt, but the fires continue. 5 fires have occurred at their sites since this one, and 1 fire burnt for a week. No link to other fires was made. So if Andrea could respond to this statement first.
Thank you. Thank you, Henry. Andrea, would you like to take that one first?
Thank you, Chair. So the first thing we wanted to do is I wanted to put this into context. So Viridor have over 300 waste management facilities in the UK. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. So fires at waste transfer station sites can and do occur, even at well-managed ones like at Beddington. Every incident is different. This Viridor incident looked at specific circumstances around the fire at Beddington Lane, and identified some clear and tangible actions that have been put in place to reduce the risk of a similar event happening in the future. The Viridor team at Beddington issued an incident alert to their colleagues at sites across the country. So likewise, the Viridor Beddington team will receive incident alerts relating to other facilities. And so this ensures that shared learning is achieved. The most common cause of fires, as we've discussed, is electronic items containing lithium-ion batteries that's been discarded in the residual waste. Now, the increase in this waste in all of our waste streams due to more electronic items being thrown away is having an impact on the frequency of these fires across the industry. So I suppose we all have an important role to play by trying to ensure that these items are disposed of correctly, along with other materials that can cause fires, such as the barbecues and the gas canisters as well. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. We will continue with Jim Duffy's questions. Henry, please.
Okay, and the second, they do not apologise for the pollution caused. A simple, unqualified apology is needed.
Okay, so I mean, clearly the fire was extremely regrettable and an unfortunate incident. But what I'll do is I'll pass that request on to Viridor. Okay.
Thank you, Andrea. Henry.
And number 3, they have produced no information about the toxins likely to have been emitted. Mattresses contain arsenic and other toxic compounds from fire retardants. Burnt plastic releases furans and dioxins. Burnt electronics emit heavy metals such as arsenic, cadmium, cyanide, chromium, and lead. Other likely elements include nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, and particulates. These compounds are known to cause health effects ranging from asthma and other breathing difficulties to cancer and infant mortality.
So, yeah, very, very serious indeed. And Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, accurately predicting the emissions released by an accidental fire such as this is going to be extremely difficult. It's impracticable to capture the gases from the fire, as it was an unplanned event. And the way that which is firing is fought makes it difficult to conduct the analysis, as we've discussed earlier. The fire investigation report confirms that a full examination was not possible, as a front loader was used to excavate the waste as part of the firefighting process. And again, we've covered this element already. I think we want to note that it was an isolated, unplanned incident and completely regrettable and unfortunate. But according to the Environment Agency, it's unlikely to have had a significant impact on health or the environment. The Environment Agency attended the site on the day of the incident, and having surveyed the scene, in their professional opinion, the fire was deemed to have had a minor impact on health, quality of life, and or the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Henry, can you continue with the next part, please?
Number 4, they called the fire small in their press release on the day. When the statement was released, the fire was burning the roof of the storage building and the plume was hundreds of feet high. This statement was played down in the report as subjective. Neither the original statement nor its reframing are acceptable. The fire brigade labelled it as a serious fire.
Yeah, no, and the Viridor incident report does now recognise that the fire was a significant incident, and we welcome this as a more accurate representation of what happened. I think the only thing that we could add to that is that thanks to the quick response from Viridor and the fire service, there were no fatalities or injuries. Damage was contained, and there was minimal disruption. So. Caused to the activities on the site. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Henry, would you like to continue?
Number 5, they do not include a crucial report from the London Fire Brigade. Positive quotes are cherry-picked from the Fire Brigade investigation report, but the entire report is missing. Viridor informed that they cannot submit it as the Brigade makes a charge, but this is misleading. Mr. Collett from the Brigade emailed me in November to say that only the report would be confidential to the site operators.
Can I stop you there, Henry, because I think we can cut to the chase on this because the reports have now been released.
Yes.
Andrea, would you like to confirm? Obviously, we have the reports.
Yeah. So we purchased copies of the reports, and we received permission on Monday. You know, we worked really hard actually with the London Fire Service to get permission to publish those reports, because we knew it was really important to, you know, as part of this process, that the public had access to those. So yeah, really pleased to say that's not an issue now. We purchased the reports and we had permission to publish them, which we received on Monday.
Thank you, Henry. So for members of the committee, we are taking some time over this, and we're doing that because obviously there's a great deal of public interest. We have a series of questions, and we're not through them yet, from Jim Duffy of South West London Air Quality Monitoring Group. I think it's really important that we take all this challenge on board. So I just ask for your patience. We will get to you shortly. Henry, would you like to continue?
Yes. The point number 6. The fire risk assessment for the storage building was not produced, as the building had only a single fire extinguisher available on the day. This suggests the risk assessment was inadequate. We urge the partnership to press Viridor to publish this document and its updated version.
Okay. So the Environment Agency, I just wanted to set up first. It's the Environment Agency that regulate all the permitted sites and requires suitable and sufficient risk assessments and management plans to be in place. And then the London Fire Brigade are responsible for visiting premises to check that fire risk assessments and the fire prevention measures are appropriate. So the London Fire Service already has powers to take action if they think safety measures aren't adequate at the site. In addition, Viridor have their own processes where the fire risk assessments are reviewed annually, and they also get a third party to review those every 3 years, which I think is important to get that external review on them. And I've made a request to Viridor that their fire risk assessments can be made publicly available, so we can share them with this committee.
Thank you, Andrea. The next question is also something that we've already touched on, which is about the storage area not having a sprinkler system. So I would just like to, Andrea, to just recap on the current practice for the storage.
Okay, yeah. So, as I said in the report, after the report, Viridor have confirmed that the area affected by the fire is not being used since the incident, and there are no plans to use it in the future. All bulky waste will now be taken to the ERF pre-treatment building, which is fitted with a sprinkler system and a fire detection system as well. As I said before, as a contingency measure, Viridor are considering the use of an alternative, adjacent and suitably permitted waste transfer station, which was modified in December 2019.
Okay, thank you. Now, Mr. Duffy put a summary that the report, he says, fails in many crucial areas, but then he has a follow-up. So I'd like, please, Henry, for you to read the initial summary and then get to the follow-up once I think the late material had been published.
So the summary was that the report fails in many crucial areas, and he requests that the partnership rejects the report and recommend that the storage building ceases to be used without a sprinkler system, and a failure of the partnership to respond with full scrutiny may well affect its credibility. After the late material was published, he did follow up with an email, but did criticise the report for being very brief, and the fact that there's no appraisals of fire risk assessment of the building nor any recommendations. So if you'd like to cover that, Andrea.
Yeah, sorry, Henry. Yes. So I think we just wanted to highlight really that we're really pleased that we were able to obtain permission from the London Fire Service, you know, to make all those reports in relation to the incident publicly available. That was really, really important to us and something that, you know, we worked hard on. You know, as we've talked about before, the Environment Agency regulates the permit, and it's for them to decide whether it's sufficient and adequate, and then it's for the London Fire Service to then follow that up with checks again to make that judgment whether it's suitable and adequate. I think I suppose if there are further concerns with the fire investigation report, then you know, we need to advise residents to contact the London Fire Brigade directly.
Thank you, Andrea. Was there a further email, Henry, from Jim Duffy?
Yes, there was a further email. He was just confirming that he will email the London Fire Brigade to confirm that it's their full report. And he did ask for the fire risk assessment again, just asking for the original fire risk assessment.
So that's something, is it, Andrea, that we would advise Mr. Duffy to take up with London Fire Brigade? Is that right?
A copy of the fire risk assessment for the building. So I've made a request with Viridor that they make the fire assessment available. You know, so the first place I would obviously bring them to is this group, and then we can also make them available to Jim Duffy. But I've spoken to Viridor about that, so we'll wait to see their response on that.
Thank you. So for Mr. Duffy, I hope we've answered all your questions, and certainly you've had that opportunity to put before the committee your comments, which they will take into account when we're discussing the item shortly. I'd like now to move on to two shorter sets of questions. One from David. I'm going to let you introduce this, Henry.
One from David Tillingirian. Apologies if that's not pronounced correctly, but I believe the next two questions have already been mostly answered, so this should be brief, so apologies to members. So from David, he asked, as the unfiltered open air burning of bulk waste will release various pollutants, what calculations have been made to estimate and assess the impact of the smoke plume on the air quality of the surrounding areas during the 9-hour fire at the Beddington site in July 2019?
Andrea, if you could just...
Yeah, I think I just wanted to reiterate it. You know, the Environment Agency, they attended the site on the day of the incident, and in their professional opinion, the fire would have had a minor impact on human health, quality of life, or the environment. So hopefully that offers the reassurance. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I mean, obviously, it is a serious, significant event, but it's very hard to estimate, and we have to take what independent expert advice we have, and the London Fire Brigade being one of them, and the Environment Agency. So I think we're now on to, is it this the last question from the member?
Yes. Yes, the last question was from Mark Webb. He's asking, previously been asked, but please can I specifically ask why the report does not include the original fire risk assessment or the current one with the amended management regime? Without these, it is impossible to know whether the fire prevention measures were originally adequate or whether the current measures have improved the situation.
Okay, thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, so as I say, I think we've answered that. I mean, the question does ask about the building design, but I think the key is that Viridor won't be using that area of the site again. I think, you know, the report includes that the building wasn't permitted to take the residual waste. So I'm not sure the risk assessment before, but obviously we'll ask for that. We've made the request to Viridor to make that fire risk assessment available. But yeah, as I say, they're not using that site anymore, and the Environment Agency, whilst categorising it as a significant event, they've said it would have had a minor impact. So again, hoping that offers reassurance.
Yes, thank you very much, and thank you to all the members of the public and the councillors outside the committee who submitted questions. We are moving on now to the committee, and I think Councillor Collins, you were the first to indicate.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to get a few things clarified, just a couple of comments before I ask a couple of questions. Firstly, obviously, no plastics are taken to the incinerator deliberately by Violia. Violia obviously take all our plastics that are recycled to a sorting centre. So the only plastics that end up in the incineration are those that the public put into their landfill bags. So obviously one of the things we have worked on in the last year or so, and we'll carry on enforcing the message, is to recycle more, and then we don't get any plastics in the incinerator. So it's important to make that clear, because I don't want members of the public thinking that we take their recycling to the incinerator, because we don't. And the other issue as well regarding landfill, it's vitally important for the planet that we stop using landfill. And over on the site, I'm not a particular fan of incineration, because I do recognise there are emissions, but that landfill site was rapidly running out of space. So therefore the alternative anyway, if we didn't have an incinerator, would be thousands and thousands of diesel or petrol journeys across the country to other relevant sites. So again, that's not particularly helpful to air quality either. So it's a very difficult situation we're in at the moment in terms of finding the technologies and the solutions right now. But going on to the fire, it's important that we do hold Viridor to account on this as a South London Waste Partnership, because I was chair at the time, and I'm not very happy that after having to chase Viridor to tell them how seriously I was taking this particular incident, that when I had a discussion with them, they didn't mention that they were using a waste site that they weren't supposed to. So it's extremely disappointing to get a fire report that says, well, actually, you weren't supposed to be using that particular site to transfer your waste on. And it seems that it's miraculous that all of a sudden, within a few short months, by 2019 December, that they've now managed to find a transfer site that on the same site that's actually got fire detection equipment, and also fire prevention stuff, and obviously sprinklers. So my sort of question would be that we should really be asking Viridor why in the first place, when they were currently designing the facility, and this is bearing in mind that a lot of these sites have got a record of having fires right across the whole country, and some are unavoidable at times, but if other sites have got fire detection and have got fire prevention in those transfer sites, why at the very outset did Viridor not make sure that was the case over at the site they've just built, which is supposedly, I think, one of the more modern sites. So I don't really see there's too much excuse from Viridor for that. And I am personally disappointed that didn't come up when I had discussions from them, because I feel like they really should have mentioned that they were using a piece of land that they shouldn't have been using. And so moving on to the next subject is what penalties or what fines are appropriate for us to talk to the Environment Agency about imposing on them for the breaches that the fire service have actually said to them. I mean, are we just, is it pretty toothless? Because I'd be very interested to know, if we can, if we're starting a new relationship with another company now that's taken over this KKR company, I think now is the time to actually say to them, look, we've had this incident with Viridor, whether you're keeping those staff on or not is here, Viridor staff is neither here nor there, but this shouldn't be happening again. And what we should be doing is making sure that there's a better relationship with KKR, and they're told, KKR, that they're told that we expect them to start attending some of our South London Waste Partnership meetings to answer some of these questions that the public ask rather, because our officers can only relay what is in the report. So it concerns me that the pressure is entirely on South London Waste Partnership officers, and we don't really have any clout in terms of punishing them for what I think is a bit disingenuous in terms of what they told us originally. So I'm a bit concerned about that. What surprises me is that all of a sudden in 2019, a few months after the fire, they've managed to build an area to put their waste where there's sprinklers and where there's fire detection. Well, the horse has bolted. They should have done that right at the outset. And I think, to put it crudely, we should be giving them a complete bollocking for that and making sure that we do actually say to them, this isn't acceptable in future. And if this happens again, you're going to have to come and address the public at our meetings instead of allowing us to have to explain everything for them. So I'm very frustrated with Viridor over this, and I hope that we can be firmer and we can investigate the maximum penalties that we can within the law if they do this sort of thing again, where it's clearly they haven't complied with everything they should have. So it's just my frustration there. Sorry, Chair, if I went on a bit too long.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I understand your frustration. We, as a committee, we take this event very seriously, and obviously we want to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I don't know. I'm completely in the dark as to whether or not we can impose penalties. I'd be interested in seeing if we could pursue that or look at imposing them in the future if we can't do it retrospectively, setting the expectation for the new KKR relationship. It's certainly something that I would like us to look into because I think it's important that we set the standards. I will come to Andrea to comment on that, but I also wanted to say that this idea of having KKR, as it will be, come to the committee, is that something that we could ask to happen?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of your last question with KKR, I mean, we extended the invitation to Viridor and their parent company, and we will do the same with KKR, and we'll work on that relationship and stress the importance of their attendance to this meeting. We have done and we will continue to. So it's as the councillor said, it's an opportunity. It's a new relationship, so it's a new opportunity for us to explore. Did you want me to answer the other questions as well in relation? Yeah.
I mean, so yes, please, if you would stress the importance, and if you don't get any response, then let me know, and we will put some more pressure on, because I think it's important, as Councillor Collins was saying, that we're just speaking for them at the moment, for Viridor as it was, and it would be for KKR, and it's more appropriate for them to speak for themselves. So yes, please, and make that very strongly represented, please. Yes, and if you could come to the other question about what penalties, what powers do we have?
So in terms of penalties, if I start with the Environment Agency, because the Environment Agency found them in breach of their permit, that whilst they haven't issued them a financial penalty, they have given them a score. And that score will result in a change to their classification banding, and that's in turn that then feeds into and calculates their annual monitoring subsistence charge to the Environment Agency. So, whilst they haven't had a financial penalty as such, this will have a financial impact on Viridor, this incident, and it's also worth noting that it's a reputational cost for Viridor as well as a financial cost as well. So I think that is important to take into consideration, that there is that financial and reputational impact from that category score that they've received. In terms of, you asked me about the partnership. In terms of the partnership, we within the contract, we have the performance management framework, the PMF. I've talked about this earlier in the meeting. And as part of that PMF, there are 60 performance targets, 60 different performance items. And we can and have applied service correction notices to Viridor as a result of breaches, in permits and contract requirements. But it's not our role to sort of regulate the permit, but there are mechanisms in the contract that we can apply. Yes, yeah. When there is cause contractually for us to do so, then yes, we can apply those. You raised another question as well in terms of the use of the transfer station. So if I answer that as well at the same time. So Viridor have said that the ERF pre-treatment building was undergoing some works during the time of the fire, which was why the material was being stored in that area. So now the material has been moved back into that ERF pre-treatment area. So that was their response that they detailed in the report for the reason for using that area of the site. I think that answers. Does that answer all of the questions?
Yes, I think so. Thank you, Andrea. Unless Councillor Collins has anything that he thinks we've missed.
No, that was fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. I have a next questioner is Councillor Aberlin.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm glad Councillor Collins provided those clarifications at the start of his intervention. He beat me to it, and I do share many of the frustrations that were outlined by Councillor Collins as well. Just thinking about the future, just a very specific question. Obviously, as members, we need to get the reassurances that the recommendations in the report are being implemented and that the facility is operating safely. So I wondered if officers are intending on reporting back at this committee to give us an update as to whether they're satisfied that the changes as set in the report are in place. I think what Councillor Collins said, maybe we could invite someone from Viridor to come in and provide us those reassurances. I think we'd welcome that. And when do you expect that we could be in a position to have that meeting in the autumn? I think that would be welcomed, or at the next meeting if possible. But it'd be interesting to hear a bit more on that from officers.
Okay, thank you,
Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so in terms of your first question about monitoring, absolutely, we'll monitor how Viridor have responded. We'll continue with site visits to ensure that the measures that they've detailed in the report are in place and continue to be in place going forward. And yeah, absolutely more than happy to include an update as part of my quarterly phase A and B contract management report. We can include a section in that report so that we can update you each quarter on our site visits and our inspections, just to ensure that everything is still working as the plan, as per the report. Would that be okay? Yeah. In terms of the meeting with Viridor, as I said, we have invited and we will express our desire to have a representative from Viridor at this meeting again. And as I said before, the new owners with KKR, it presents a new opportunity for us to repeat that invitation, and we'll do that. We'll take that away. As to a date when that might happen, I probably can't speak on Viridor's behalf in that respect, but we will ask the question.
Thank you, Andrea. Sorry, there's the time lag while I find the unmute button. The next councillor who has a question is Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a question and what I think now is more of an observation, given the points I think I would have made have just been made by Councillors Collins and Aberlin. I certainly associate myself with the sentiments that they've expressed and some of the suggestions and recommendations. I mean, my observation, which Andrea could respond to if she wishes, is there aren't actually any recommendations before us this evening, other than to just note the contents of the report. And given that this has been categorised as a significant incident, and given the comments that Councillors Collins and Abelan have made, and suggesting that committee members do see this as a very serious matter, as indeed you do, Chair, because I know you've mentioned it yourself this evening. It just strikes me that some observers might think it odd that the report doesn't have any recommendations to return to this, to invite Viridor to come back. Now I'm conscious that the minutes of the meeting will reflect the nature of the conversation, so perhaps we don't necessarily formally need to amend the recommendations to encompass them. But I do think as a partnership, we do need to return to this and be confident that the matters before us this evening have been adequately addressed. My one question, actually, that I would appreciate a response to is just whether we've got 3 reports before us. We've got the Fire Brigade's report, the Environment Agency's report, and Viridor's own report. And I just wondered if Andrea had thought there was anything in those 3 reports that were contradictory. So whether something in one report is, runs contrary to what something, what one of the other reports suggests or indicates. Those are my points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor King. I think you raise an interesting point, that I think this matter is so serious that it feels a bit weak to be just saying we note the report. I would like the committee to have to make some comments about actions that we're going to take in the future. And I think we've already touched on a couple of them, that the officers will report back on their quarterly site visits, or report back quarterly on their site visits, etc. And I think maybe a couple of others. So I will be looking perhaps from officers or other members for suggestions about a handful of points that we would like to have noted. I'd like to also obviously see what Andrea would like to say as well.
Yes, I completely agree. I mean, we've said that this is a significant event, and whilst I have said that we're gonna take these actions, I haven't necessarily put those in the report, but we will, as the South London Waste Partnership, as part of our contract management function, do all those things, and I'm more than happy. We can include maybe a health and safety section in the quarterly management report. I mean, I visit the site, other than in lockdown, I visit the site on a monthly basis. We can increase the frequency of that to begin with, perhaps to sort of reflect the severity, the significance of what's happened, perhaps the severity, the significance. And then, as I say, I'll come back with regular reports to borough leads, which we do anyway. We report to borough leads monthly, and I'll include a section in our quarterly report to yourselves. Yeah, I think in terms of the recommendation reflects that the investigation is complete, but that doesn't necessarily mean that our actions and our monitoring of the situation is complete. We will continue to monitor, and we will continue to discuss with Viridor their fire prevention plan, and that's something that's ongoing regardless of the investigation being complete. Is that okay?
It is, and I'd just like to add to it. I think having a health and safety section in the quarterly report will provide some reassurance. I think we also said having the contractor, the manager of the site, coming to our meetings when we want them to, not just a request but a requirement. So a strong request anyway. I'd like that in there as well, because so that they are accountable to the committee, and questioners can ask questions directly of them rather than through us. I would also like something in around the performance management, and it may be that I just need to become familiar with what the performance management are. It may be that they're strong enough, or we may want to add something in that gives us an extra level of reassurance. Maybe that will be something that we could discuss at the next meeting of this committee. Those are my first three thoughts. I wondered if any other committee members had any thoughts about things that we want to note specifically in the minutes that we are doing extra in reaction to this report, rather than just noting the report. So if you'd just like to unmute if anybody's got any thoughts on that particular point. You're leaving me hanging here. And that's fine. But I'm going to just say, are you happy then with the 3 items? And also Andrea, are all those 3 reasonable? Are you happy with that? Does anybody else have a comment? Okay, I'll take it that we'll put those 3 remarks as notes in the minutes as actions that we're taking forward as a reaction to this report. So I don't think I have any further members wanting to ask questions. If you do want to ask a question, please unmute and say so at this point. Okay, can we agree then to note the contents of this report? If there are any objections, please can you indicate in the chat function? And we're noting the report with the comments, 3 comments that I just made. Okay, the report is noted. Thank you, Henry. Okay, we're now moving on to item 10, which is the JWC Communications and Engagement, SLWP Phase A and B contract. So we're looking at our communications and how well we're doing on talking to residents, informing them. And I would like John Haynes to introduce this report.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good evening, councillors. So this paper provides the committee with an update on communications and engagement matters relating to the Partnerships Phase A and B contracts, and it also seeks approval on the 3-year Partnership Communication Strategy. If I could start with the strategy document, which is actually appended to the paper at page 71 of the report pack. Just to provide some background on this, so at the last meeting of the committee back in February, I presented the findings of the 2019 SLWP resident survey. This is an independently conducted survey that has taken place every 3 years since 2010. Those findings have been used to evaluate the effectiveness of our communications and engagement activities over the last 3 years and develop a strategy for the coming 3 years. I'll now just take a few minutes, if that's okay, to briefly talk you through each section of the strategy. Starting with section 1 on page 72. Section 1 introduces the strategy. It takes a step back and reflects on the fact that when the last communication strategy was drafted 3 years ago, the boroughs were still operating 4 separate collection systems. They were sending their residual waste to landfill, and they were struggling, along with the rest of the country, to improve their recycling rates. Today, 400,000 households across the region are using a harmonised collection service. Our average recycling rate has risen by 7 percentage points, and our residual waste is being used to generate energy rather than being buried in the ground, representing an important step up the waste hierarchy. So it's been a very challenging few years, but I think you can see from that that an awful lot has been achieved. The next 3 years will undoubtedly be equally challenging, with ambitious environmental targets to be met against the backdrop of a world trying to recover from the impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Turning to page 73, section 2 clearly sets out the scope of the strategy. And moving on to section 3, this section links to an appendix at the end of the document, which reviews the activities undertaken over the last 3 years and uses the findings from the most recent resident survey to assess how effective these activities have been in achieving our objectives. Section 4 from page 74 onwards is the key part of the document, where the priorities for the next 3 years are set out, along with a revised set of SMART objectives, which we can measure ourselves against in 2022. As I've said, the 10 priority themes in this section are based on the findings from the 2019 survey and reflect the presentation that was given to members at the last committee meeting back in February. There is one additional theme that has been added since, and that theme is one that considers the short, medium and long-term impacts that the coronavirus pandemic may have on attitudes and behaviours in relation to waste and recycling. A very challenging area. I'm sure you'll understand that it's very early days in terms of truly understanding what the impacts of that will be. But I think it's really important, writing a strategy document at the moment, it's almost impossible not to try and consider those important issues and how we might tackle them. So then that's a brief overview of the communication strategy document. Turning back to the main part of my report on page 64, the communications update, page 64 of the report pack, you can see that our destination recycling campaign that we ran last year has been shortlisted for a national recycling award. And Councillor Collins, it was very nice to hear you flag that campaign up as one of the highlights of your year. So thank you very much for that. That means a lot. It means a lot to hear that. There's a summary on how communications and engagement activities have supported the partnership boroughs in keeping residents informed about their waste, recycling and street cleaning services throughout the coronavirus pandemic, which has clearly been a key focus for the partnership since the last time we met in February. I think it's worth noting here that although strictly speaking the collection service falls outside of the remit of this committee, the efforts that frontline staff at Viridor and Violia went to in order to keep services running during the peak of the lockdown should be recognised. And indeed, letters were sent to frontline staff at both Viridor and Violia on behalf of the committee, thanking them for their efforts. I think it's also worth highlighting that there was a real wave of appreciation for some of the frontline workers delivering those services, which was very nice to see, and it would be nice to see that continue into the future. Page 66 of my report provides more details on how communications were used to support the closure and the subsequent partial reopening of the 6 household reuse and recycling centres. I know Andrea's touched on that already, but we did a lot of work to make sure residents were aware of the changes in the arrangements on the sites and to get temporary signage in place and all that sort of stuff. So all made slightly more difficult in a lockdown when things like printers are perhaps not around and all that sort of stuff, but we got through that. And I would also say that the 4 borough communications teams worked really well in partnership during that period to make sure that information was accurate and consistent. Page 67 moves on to matters relating to the management and restoration of the former landfill site at Beddington. In June, concerns were raised by local stakeholders about low water levels at the site and the impact on nesting birds. Viridor provided responses to those concerns, and the matter was discussed at the June meeting of the Conservation and Access Management Committee. And then finally, page 68 of my report provides an overview of the activities relating to the Beddington ERF. Viridor continue to upload emissions reports to the virtual visitor centre on a regular basis. I know that Councillor Collins referenced frustrations about a delay to one of the reports going up. I know that the April report was a few weeks late going up to the site due to a technical problem with producing that report, but that issue has since been rectified. I think it's also worth noting that some improvements have been made recently to the guidance note and the report cover sheets that accompany those emissions reports to help residents interpret those reports more accurately, and also goes into a bit more detail about the change to the permits around carbon monoxide, which I know Andrea's covered earlier, and also in particular the reason why on the carbon monoxide reports you get these daily invalid results. which isn't a problem with the system. It's just to do with the fact that the system resets every day. That reset takes about 20 minutes. And in the past, when the averages were worked out over a half-hour session, the system could reset and reboot within that half hour. But now it doesn't have time to reboot. So that's why you get, since January, you'll notice that you now get this daily one or so invalid results. So that's the reason for that. And finally, the latest edition of the Beddington Community Newsletter will be distributed to households in the vicinity of the site in the next few weeks. That newsletter will focus on raising awareness of the on-site education centre, the virtual visitor centre, the Community Benefit Fund, and the Beddington Farmlands Restoration Programme. So that's all I have to say by way of introduction, Chair, but I'd welcome any questions that members of the committee might have.
Thank you, John. It's a very interesting report, and of course it covers the effectiveness of the last 3 years, and also some challenging targets and some really stretched targets, I would say. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for the work you've done, and destination recycling was excellent. And for the flexibility and the reaction that you've been able to help us during the pandemic. That's been great to be working as 4 boroughs together with you on communications during this difficult period. I would like to ask if there's any members who have questions on this very detailed report. I don't actually see. Yes, we have one. Councillor Cobbett, would you like to unmute?
Thank you. Yeah, I really welcome this comprehensive report and update. Sorry, mine.
Yeah, no, is very poor.
Oh, it's my connection. Or...
Yeah, is it the same for everyone? I think it is. We can't really. I don't know whether you want to put your question in the chat or try connecting again, perhaps, with a different device. I don't know.
I'll try using the chat.
Okay, thank you. We're getting an electronic message in the chat now, which I will relay.
Shall I just pick up your point, Chair, that you made about the stretching targets while Councillor Cobbett is doing that? I mean, I think that's right. And when you look at the section which reviews how we've got on in the previous 3 years, I really think it's important with communications that we set measurable targets. I think that's key. Obviously, it can be challenging to make sure that they're stretching but not completely unachievable. But I think we got it about right for the last 3 years. When you look through that table, you can see that there were some that were completely achieved, some that were partially achieved, and a handful that were not achieved. And I think I don't see that as a failure personally. I think that if you set yourself stretching targets, then sometimes you don't achieve all of them. But I would rather do that and be ambitious than sort of set targets that I think we can achieve without a great effort. So that's hopefully that's a bit of feedback on that.
Yes, and I would agree. If we're setting a target, for example, of 88% now, I believe it's very important we send less waste to landfill. Getting an achievement of 69% is actually pretty good. The proportion of residents who believe that it's better to not send to landfill. So I count that as an achievement, even though it's technically not achieved. I must admit, I'm looking forward to you achieving the 50% of residents will have an understanding of the terms carbon neutrality and net carbon zero, because I think that might be a tough one, but it would be great if everybody did. So 50%, I'll hold you to that in 2022.
Yeah, please do.
Tim, do we have, yes, hang on, I need to scroll down to get your question. I'll just relay it. Tim was going to ask what we have found to work in relation to blocks of flats with communal facilities for recycling and high turnover of occupancy to reach those audiences with our recycling messages and help improve recycling rates. Thank you, Tim.
Yeah, absolutely. So recycling in communal properties is a huge challenge. The recycling that we collect from communal properties is pretty poor quality, and at the moment we have to send it for additional sorting, which is expensive and not ideal. So yeah, we are working really hard. Obviously, the reason it's so challenging is that a lot of the measures we have in place in terms of door knocking and letters and bin tags that would work on an individual property basis don't work in a communal setting, because it's very, very difficult to identify from which property that the problem is originating. So it is a huge challenge. It is in the strategy. There is a particular target around improving the quality of the recycling collected, and in particular in relation to communal properties. We're working very closely with the London Waste and Recycling Board, because they've done some excellent project trial work in half a dozen boroughs, looking at various different interventions. And we also have a project that we're running in 3 estates at the moment in Sutton, and we're looking to extend that, where we're trying to replicate some of these things that Elwall have done in central London boroughs, and see if they also work in our boroughs. And we'll be looking to produce a report sort of early next year on that. And if we can, the problem is these changes, they're quite resource and cost intensive. So we need to trial them out and make sure they work, and that there's evidence that they work. And then if they do work, we can look at rolling them out wider across the partnership region. But we need to make sure they deliver a return on a fairly substantial investment.
Thank you, John. I'm still muted there. Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment or ask a question about the report? Well, I will wrap up this item then, and just say, as I've said, I think it's really important that we engage with our residents, because we need to all work together to make the improvements and reach the targets that we need to reach on our recycling rates. And it's really good to have this checkpoint of how our residents are feeling, what they think, what they know, so that we know how to engage with them. So thank you very much for the report and for the challenging targets.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. And we are now moving, I believe, to the last item on the agenda, which I forgot to ask, didn't I, whether there were any questions from members of the public, but I believe there were none.
Yeah, just to confirm that there were none. And can we please have just a vote to note the contents of the report?
Yep. Can we note the contents of the report? Thank you, Henry. Getting late. And we have no objections to noting the report, so we take that as a positive. Thank you, Henry. So we're agreeing the strategy document and noting the contents of the report. And since we don't have any challenges, I believe we're good to go. So yes, that is agreed. Thank you, Henry. So turning to the last item, we have the Joint Waste Committee risk report as of July 2020, which Andrea is going to come back and introduce. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. I shall be brief. We're getting late, aren't we? Apologies. So this is the risk report. It summarises the key risk areas which are facing the partnership boroughs in relation to the waste disposal functions of this Joint Waste Committee. The confidential risk register is held by the partnership team and is reviewed by the Strategic Management Group quarterly. The risks that are highlighted in this report are considered strategically important because they present a notable risk score, have a budget impact, and or have changed significantly in score since our last report. I'll quickly run through. There is a new risk to this report relating to COVID-19, and you'll find this at 2.2. COVID-19 has resulted in a shift in our resident behaviour. With more people staying at home, this has resulted in an increase in our curbside residual waste tonnes. In addition, we've also seen a significant increase in recycling and food waste, which is good for recycling, but it does also have an impact on budgets. So this increase in tonnes will place some pressure on our waste treatment and disposal budgets. 2.5, we've highlighted the risk around the availability of PPE. However, I just wanted to update that our contractors have not reported any issue with the supply of PPE, and they have been taking measures to gradually increase the levels of PPE. So just gradually, responsibly increasing those. We continue to deal with the risks presented by the recycling markets, and also the impact that this has on our contractor performance. And then finally, at 2.9 of the report, we carry forward the risk highlighted around Brexit as we've moved into the transition period. So it's important to note that whilst this does present a risk to our recycling, I wanted to highlight that we don't expect any type of Brexit to prevent us from being able to safely dispose of our residual waste, because obviously we have the ERF facility located within our boroughs and in close proximity to our waste. So we are we have a low risk in that respect. And so the committee is asked to note the contents of the report, and happy to take any questions. Oh, that's my daughter.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for this report. I would like I'm going to make a request for the report. It sounds as though that all the risks are identified, I would say, in my layman's view. And it sounds as though all of them are being managed, so they're nothing for us to worry about. I would like to see the report maybe next time being RAG rated, so red, amber, green, so that at a glance we can see which ones are the ones that we need to worry about more. So I'm hoping we won't get any red ones, but if there are, and the committee would be able to see at a glance what they would be. So I'd be grateful for that. I'll turn to the committee to see whether there are any questions. I don't believe we have any questions from members of the public. Henry, were there any questions submitted by members of the public?
No, there were none, Chair.
Thank you. And does the committee have any questions for Andrea on this risk report? I'm just waiting to see if there's anybody in the chat function wanting to ask a question. No, I think, Andrea, you've done a good job there in answering everybody's questions that they might have had. I would just like to say that the rigid plastics and the mattresses, I look at that target, what would have happened at the recycling rates. The average across them would have been 69%, quite a jump if we'd been able to find outlets for the rigid plastics and mattresses. So I know that officers are working really hard on, well, rather the contractor is working very hard to find a market, I believe. Any chance? What are the likelihood? It's just, that's bad news, isn't it? Really, for the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the situation that we want. But it's a national issue, and we're keeping the material as separate as far as we can, so we can very quickly react if a market does come available. But it's really important that that when we do find a market, that it's reliable and we're confident in the audit trail, because we absolutely must have an audit trail on where our recycling is going and how it's being managed. So that is the most important thing. Whilst it's not acceptable that there's just no recycling markets out there. I mean, it's a national problem, and I think we probably need a national policy to fix the problem. I think that's the only way we're going to solve this issue. But yeah, there are so many issues with plastics, and in particular the rigid plastics, and as well as I say, the markets for mattresses. So we are not alone. It is a national issue. But yeah, hoping national policy might start to drive some change in those areas.
Maybe as councillors we need to lobby for that. Something to think about. Thank you for that. So I see no questions in the chat. in which case, can we agree the strategy document and note the contents of this report? If there are any objections or if there's anything you want to say, please unmute or use the chat. And I think I'll take that as we agree the strategy document and note the contents of the report. Sorry, yes, that's right. No, we agree the contents of the report. I'll turn now to any urgent business. There are no urgent items of business, and we are now going to conclude the meeting at 9:21, and the live stream will now end. And I'd like to thank members of the committee for your participation.